I'm Phil Marsh, this is the HodgeCast.
Phil Marsh, footballing alumni and a former Manchester United prospect. Phil has brushed shoulders and played with some of the greats of the sport, signing for Manchester United when the club was arguably at its level best under the legendary Sir Alex Ferguson. Phil is someone who has been there, done that and worn the t-shirts, where money is no object and talent overrides everything. In this episode, we chat to Phil about the side you don't hear when it comes to fame and fortune, what it is like to have the world at your feet when so young with so much potential.
And that's I got picked up at United at the age of 11, so from sort of only starting at maybe the age of 7 or 8 in terms of playing football properly, in a 3-year, 4-year period, it was, from playing at Pelks to, then going on to playing at United. Signed and went in full time. I was mixing with the likes of Rooney, Ronaldo, Solskjaer, Tevez, all these players that you see now, winning at all costs. The manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, had banned all first and second year YTs from driving into the training ground. We used to get minibuses that picked us up. And then unfortunately, as we went round the corner on one of these snaky roads, he put his foot down to accelerate, and I think I don't really remember much about it, but I think he just bottled it and backed out, and the back of the car just spun out. And all I remember was the car started spinning, and I just shut my eyes because I seen the car coming straight the other way, and the next thing I knew, I was getting cut out of the car by the fire and rescue service.
Fame and then fortune that comes with it. Some people, they can go down wrong sort of paths, so it can be a case of turning into drink, drugs. But yours, like I was saying, was gambling.
Some bad habits really, like going into bookies in town and amusements and places like that, and because you've got that bit of extra money, it's just, if I lose it, so what. But I think for me it sort of spiraled a little bit and ended up sort of getting a little bit obsessive and spending a lot of time in there and wasting probably a lot of money. If you hadn't have been that way, I think a lot of players have come out and said this, it would have been completely different. I think the way he was, he got that respect out of everybody, and the dressing room ended up basically managing itself because of the amount of impact and power he had.
Who's the best player you played against? Hello. For those that know me, will likely know my story. Back in 2017, I tried to take my own life. One thing that hadn't occurred to me is, had I been successful, there would have been no financial safety net for my loved ones. We here at HodgeCast have teamed up with Assured Life Advisors, a financial planning business that helps protect families and business owners from some of life's uncertainties. Assured Life Advisors empowers its customers to secure their financial futures. Remember, with appropriate financial planning advice, you can help reduce the impact to your loved ones should the worst case ever happen. Please visit the link to their website in the description below for more information. Don't delay. Plan your loved one's future today. Thank you, and enjoy this next episode of HodgeCast. What is your challenge? Phil Marsh, former pro football player for Manchester United, living the high life with the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson and Cristiano Ronaldo. However, fame and fortune isn't always what it's cracked up to be. Today, me and Phil will touch on the highs and lows of having the world at your feet in the world of sports. Thanks for the show, mate.
Good
How
to
we
see
doing?
you, pal.
Good to have you.
Yeah, all good, mate. Yeah, good to be on.
Good stuff. So, to be honest with you, Phil, you've been quite highly recommended to come on the show, so it's great that you've took time out to come on. And we've known each other for a while, albeit this will probably be the longest conversation we've ever had.
Yeah.
Both going to the same high school, only a couple of years apart, and then we've got pretty mutual circle of friends, haven't we? So, so obviously we do know one another. It's not like this is the first time we're meeting. The obvious elephants in the room, I'm sure everyone knows who you are from your sporting accolades in football. However, with my guests, I like to kind of strip it down to when they'd first, just so people who maybe don't know who you are, who are watching, we can lay the foundations for who you are and what you're all about. So, do you want to just talk to me? Was you born in St Helens?
Yeah, born in St Helens. Yeah, Western Hospital.
Right, fair enough. Yeah. See, I was born in Lancaster, mate. But obviously, I come when I was like 2 or something with mum. But okay, mate. So, talk to me what it was like for you growing up as a kid. Was you always into sports, or?
I think it was a weird one because really, growing up, my dad was obviously a footballer and a good footballer at that, so he was obviously trying to push me into the football side of things from a very early age. But for me, I really sort of only started fully getting into football probably a little bit later than a lot of other people. I was always out and about doing stuff, playing with friends on my bikes, as our era of kids was back then. But yeah, it took me a little bit longer really to sort of get fully into it, because I just didn't really sort of have that drive and that initial attraction to it to start with. And then as soon as sort of the penny dropped and I sort of started enjoying it and realised that I was quite good and talented, then I sort of never looked back from that point.
So what age was that about, Phil? What was you into? Was you into sport as a whole, or was you?
Yeah, I think obviously in primary school and whatever, you do your PE and you join in at break times and stuff, kicking a ball around and that. But in terms of getting into it and really sort of having that hunger and desire to want to play, it sort of only started for me probably about age 7 or 8, which was probably a little bit later than a lot of other kids who start maybe a little bit younger than that. So I remember my dad, he was obviously really keen on getting me into the football as early as I could. I started obviously at Pilkington's, which was the first sort of club that I went down to, but I didn't sort of take to it as well as my dad was probably thinking. I remember just being more bothered about how my boots looked and the sort of all that kind of thing, and I really only sort of the penny dropped, if you like, sort of a little bit later, and my dad sort of persisted with me, which I'm really glad and thankful for. And then once I realised that I was a good player and that I filled out quite early, which helped me. I think at a younger age, I was quite big and strong compared to most lads my age back then. So obviously when I started knowing how to play the game and learn the sort of fundamentals, I think I sort of never looked back and sort of progressed quite quickly from there.
Yeah, it was interesting that, because obviously, like you said, you think sort of like someone who's played at the level you have, that'd be integrated on you from the moment you're born, really, kind of thing. I mean, it's people who only really know me sort of later on in life think I was quite athletic in school, and couldn't be further from the truth. I hated PE. I never really got into sort of sport or anything well within my sort of mid to late 20s. But I kind of wished I'd trained a little bit when I was younger, but it's one of those shoulda, woulda, coulda kind of thing. Okay then, so you've mentioned there that you noticed that it kind of snowballed for you. At what point did you kind of... Was it yourself that knew, or was it somebody else who thought, do you know what, he's a baller, this lad, he's definitely going to go places? Can you remember sort of like, I know you might have been a bit young, but can you...
Yeah, so obviously, as I said, when I sort of got into it and the penny had dropped and I started playing, I think it quite quickly sort of snowballed, as you say, and I started playing the year above, so I moved straight up, because obviously I said I'd filled out quite quickly. I was bigger than a lot of lads my age. So I moved up to the upper age group. I was doing really well, obviously scoring loads of goals. I think at one point when I got to sort of like the age of 8, 9, I was actually playing for 4 teams. So like every night I was playing football, whether it be with St Helens schoolboys. I was at Wigan. I was playing for Pilks, and also the Interleague, which was the best players in the league played in a sort of couple of one-off games throughout the year, but they had some training camps and stuff. So I literally, every single day was football for me, so it was full on. And then I said, the progression just carried on, because obviously I was training all the time, I was getting better, I was training with bigger lads and lads a bit older than me, so you've got to sort of learn a bit quicker to cope with the aspects of playing with older boys and stuff. And I think once that happened and I was sort of really into my stride and enjoying it, I think it was quite noticeable then for not just myself, but a lot of people around me, my family, a lot of the coaches were saying, we've got a bit of talent on our hands here, and you could go places. So I think it went from sort of 0 to 100 quite quick in terms of me potential. And again, I got picked up at United at the age of 11, so from sort of only starting at maybe the age of 7 or 8 in terms of playing football properly, in a 3-year 4-year period, it was from playing at Pilks to then going on to playing at United. So it was quite quick.
That's a massive step up, isn't it? What do you remember? Can you kind of remember, I won't say the day as such, but can you remember, you mentioned there that you got signed for United at 11. What was that like? What was that sort of feat? Because you're a United fan, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, this is funny, because I always get sort of a bit of stick about saying I'm a United fan because, you know, predominantly the majority of my family are Liverpool supporters. So when I was growing up, I never really supported anyone because, as I said, I wasn't really into football as much from the early start. So I used to follow Liverpool a little bit because as I say, my family did, but I never really supported anybody. I used to just watch football and never really sort of took to anyone. But because I sort of went to the club at such an early age and was at United for 10 years, I think from that age I just sort of started following them, and obviously I got season tickets to go and watch them.
It's a big part of your life, isn't it? So, I mean, obviously, I compare it to like rugby league. You've got Lee Breers, who's a St Helens lad.
Yeah.
All right, he had a little stint at Saints, but fundamentally he's Warrington, he's the Wire.
Yeah.
So because he was heavily involved with United, you know, I don't know why you're getting stick for support.
That was pretty much it. So as I say, as soon as I went to United, you know, you get all the kit and you welcome to all the games and stuff at Old Trafford. So, you know, from the age of 11 up to 21, which was when I left, I was going to Old Trafford every other week watching them. So it just made sense for me to, you know, follow them and support them. So yeah, in terms of the actual day, yeah, it was. I do remember it was. So I was playing for Pilkingtons in a final at the St Helens Town Ground, the old St Helens Town Ground. We played Whiston Juniors in a final and we won 3-2. I scored 2. I scored the winning goal, which was, I think I picked it up in my own half. I beat sort of 3 or 4 people, cut in and smashed one in the top corner. And it was, we'd gone back to the Bull and Dog for just like a bit of a after do, like obviously with the cup and the parents and this, that and the other. And when we got home, my sister had took a call and it was a scout, Walter Joyce, who's, funny enough, he's Warren Joyce, as you may not know him, but he's from St Helens. He was a United reserve team manager not so long ago. I think he's gone to Nottingham Forest now, so it was his dad. I'd been to the game and watched, and obviously rung and just said, like, we've been watching him for a little bit and we watched him again tonight. We want to speak to your mum and dad and see if we can get him on a trial, because at the time I was at Wigan Athletic, which it was slightly different back then. So Wigan Athletic back then was a centre of excellence, which isn't classed as an academy. So although it's a sort of step up from playing at Pilks and stuff like that, it wasn't like a United of this world or, you know, a Liverpool or whatever. So it was a difficult situation for me because I'd just literally signed a new 2-year contract with Wigan, and then United came in and said they want me to go on trial. And basically I was sort of given a bit of an ultimatum, really, sort of to say, you know, if you go to this trial at United, you know, that you might be burning your bridges really with what's happening at Wigan. But you know, it was an opportunity that I couldn't really turn down. And it was worth the gamble.
Yeah.
And luckily enough for me, as I say, it was worth the gamble. I went on it was supposedly meant to be a 2-week trial. I only ended up doing 2 sessions, and they said I'd seen enough and said, like, yeah, we definitely want you to sign. Obviously we know you're under a contract at Wigan, but because it was only a centre of excellence, I was sort of not under as much sort of pressure to sort of stay, and we sort of arranged a way that I could get out of that, and I ended up signing for United pretty much the week later, and sort of, you know, never looked back after that. Really, it was brilliant.
Fair play, mate. Fair play. So you was 11 when you got signed.
11. It was,
so that there, you know, very young age. You know, you're not even in high school at that point.
I think I was just on the brink of maybe starting high school. Yeah, so I think it was sort of end of year 6, start of year 7 when I sort of like was.
Well, it's a bit of bragging rights heading into Cowley, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just. I mean, I make no qualms about it. I'm not a huge football fan. I mean, I love sport as a whole and I'll watch it, but I don't follow a team or anything. I'm not religious or anything like that in terms of how much of a fanboy I am. But one thing I do know is kind of like round about the time, for those who sort of like might be a little bit younger, United, I think it's fair to say, isn't the team it was back 5-10 years ago. Kind of paint the picture and just elaborate on how good of a team United was around about that time when you signed for them.
Yeah, I think, well, obviously I signed at a time where, you know, 99 they'd just won the treble, so, you know, something that's still talked about to this day, and rightly so, you know, winning the 3 big trophies. The players they had, you know, all absolute world-class players. You know, even from a younger age when I signed, you know, the Beckhams and people like Andy Coles, you know, legends of the club. And then luckily enough, obviously, as I say, when I sort of signed and went in full time, I was, you know, mixing with the likes of Rooney, Ronaldo, Solskjaer, Tevez, Scholes, Ferdinand. So all these players that you see now who are, you know, on the telly doing punditry or, you know, doing whatever, the like world class legends of the game. And United back then was winning everything. I was going watching them, and they was winning league titles after league titles, Champions League finals, FA Cups. So as you say, it's not the United of the present day, but back then it was just sort of instilled in him that winning was the only way, and that sort of filtered down into the reserves and the youth team and the academy as well. We was brought up to winning at all costs, and it worked for us because, as I say, we was really successful as well at my time at the club. I think it was just sort of the norm back then, and obviously times change. Clubs can't keep winning forever, but I think at that period at the club that I was there, it was unbelievable to just be part of that, and obviously be mixing with some of them big names we've just touched on.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone you've just named, they're a legend in their own right. So talk to me in terms of, like, you mentioned about you going at when you was 11, the sort of progression. How do people develop on to become in the first team and what have you?
Yeah, so obviously when I first joined at the age of 11, that's sort of still the academy. The academy runs up until year 16, so when you leave school. So them sort of 4 or 5 years that I had in the academy was unbelievable. You're training 2-3 times a week, and you're playing on a Saturday, but it's just the training. So like up until that point, obviously being at Pilks and St Helens Town and Wigan, you're getting decent training, but when you come to United, it's just a completely different ball game. You're getting the attention to detail, you're getting the repetition, and I think that's one thing what I didn't quite understand at the first start. Like when I went to United, I was thinking, we're doing the same sessions like all the time, but obviously later on you think, I understand why now, because I've got that absolutely nailed, because we've done it all the time and it just comes second nature, and once you've done that you can move on to other things, because I think at that age it's really sort of key and vital that you nail the sort of basics and the fundamentals, so when you get a little bit bigger they're absolutely drilled into you. Which was exactly what I needed, because as I say, I was a big lad, I was stronger than a lot of lads, I was quicker than a lot of lads because I filled out quite quick, but I was a little bit rusty around the edges in terms of my touch and my passing and my shooting, so all them little details was sort of fine-tuned, and in that academy stage is what that's all about. It's fun, but you still obviously want to get improving and sort of learning the way that Man United want you to play, and then basics just get drummed into you, and then when you get to 16, I think that was a massive sort of confidence booster for me, because the team we was in, there was only 3 lads that got offered full-time contracts, so out of a squad of probably about 15-20 lads, there was only 3 lads that got given the contracts to make it basically your job when you leave school. So me and 2 other lads ended up going in full time, and for me that was a massive confidence booster, because at that point you're thinking, I want to be a footballer, but if you don't get that contract, it's sort of like your world's ended. So yeah, obviously thankful for that, and as I say, when I got in, I ended up moving up in age group because there was only 3 of us that got kept on, so we didn't have a team. So I ended up pushing on into the under-18s straight away as I left school, which was, again, massive for me. I'd always been used to playing up an age group for me at an early age, as I said, because I was a lot bigger and stronger than sort of a lot of lads my age. So I was used to it, but again, when you're at United, that's a massive step, because the lads are all so much stronger and better, and you've got to make sure that you're on it, because you'll get found out. But as I say, for me it was brilliant, great experience, and that sort of was my first year playing sort of up an age group. I'd made my reserve team debut, I'd played in the Youth Cup, and sort of the world was at my feet, if you like, and just everything was going to plan.
Yeah. But it's testament to your, I know sometimes it can come across a bit egotistical saying how good you are, but genuinely it's testament to your talent and your work ethic and whatever, because you want to just progress. It's not just a case of you don't just wing it. You can't turn up and play at that level and wing it. So I think fair play to you on that. Right, so as you mentioned Phil, you had the world at your feet, got signed at United for an early age, you're progressing pretty quickly, and you're playing with people who are older, bigger and what have you, and you're basically thrown the deep end and learning to swim quite quickly. But like, you know, for those who may know you, may not know you, is you know, it's cliche as it sounds, but I do think there's some legitimacy to it. His fame and fortune isn't always what it's cracked up to be, and on some instances. And obviously you was involved in an accident. So do you want to just kind of paint the scene for the listeners, for the viewers, of where you was at sort of that day, how it came about? Go on, the stage is yours, mate.
Yeah, so as I say, I'd been doing really well, progressed really quickly. I was just sort of into the start of my second year of being full-time at United. As I say, I'd already made me reserve team debut, which, you know, at the age of 17 is a massive achievement. I was in the Youth Cup. We'd started rebuilding our own team because, as I said, there was only 3 of us, and I'd been made captain of that. So, you know, in terms of where I was at, it couldn't really have been much better. So we just played. I'd played at Old Trafford for the first time the night before. We'd played Man City in the Youth Cup. We'd won the game 2-1. Which was, you know, unbelievable for me, you know, playing at Old Trafford in front of a big crowd against your local rivals, winning in that game. So we'd just come in the next day for a cool down, which was the norm. Sort of after a game, you'd come in and do a bit of a cool down. And we used to do, so for people who don't know, we used to do sort of 2 days college as well. So although you're professional footballers and you're training every day, we used to do a Monday, full day, and a Thursday morning where we used to go into college and do. I did sports science and psychology, and I also did my level 1 and 2 coaching badges, because Man United and a lot of the top clubs are always big on, you know, you still got to have some sort of education to fall back on just in case the worst may happen, you know, injuries or whatever. You've got something there that you can fall back on and you know, still sort of, you know, have a career or, you know, some path into some other you know, work or whatever. So this particular day we'd came in, we'd done the cool down, and we used to get a minibus that picked us up. I was living in Sale in Manchester, just near the Trafford Centre, in digs with a couple of other lads, because what had happened was, a couple of years prior to my crash, one of the lads had actually died in a car crash coming back from Watford. A lad called Jimmy Davis had been travelling back from Watford. He was on loan at Watford from United, and he'd actually died in a car accident. So the manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, had banned all first and second year YTs from driving into the training ground. We used to get minibuses that picked us up. So this particular day, we'd done the cool down, and it got to lunchtime. We'd had some lunch. I'd done all my schoolwork, which, you know, for the first time probably in my life that I was up to date with all my work. So I'd done all that. A few of the other lads hadn't finished, so we had to sort of wait round really for them to finish before we could leave. So a few of us on this, you know, one-off occasion, we'd just won against City, bear in mind the day before, could we get a lift with some of the other lads just back to our digs, literally, you know, 5-minute drive round the corner, not a problem. And on this one particular occasion, they give us the sort of green light, yeah, you can go, not a problem, see you in the morning. So I've got into a car with one of the older lads that I stayed in digs with. Nice enough lad, you know, as I say, I lived with him, he was a, you know, nice lad. We're just coming out the training ground, and one of the reserve team players just flies past him. Now, as you come out of Carrington United's training ground, it's like a wide, long road where if you've got a bit of a nippy car, you can put your foot down. You know, obviously being young and naive, the lad I'm in the car with has sort of, you know, sped up after him, following him, and it sort of just, they sort of goaded each other a little bit. They was toing and froing. But as you leave Carrington training ground and you turn right, going past the old City training ground, it's like snaky roads. I mean, I was only a young kid, so I didn't really say anything. I'm just sat, you know, looking through some of my work and not really sort of getting involved. But yeah, obviously, as I say, them two were sort of speeding up, slowing down, having a little bit of racing, as you do probably when you're a bit young and naive. And then, unfortunately, as we went round the corner on one of these snaky roads, he's put his foot down to accelerate, and I think I don't really remember much about it, but I think he just bottled it and backed out, and the back of the car just spun out. and all I remember was the car started spinning, and I just shut my eyes because I seen a car coming straight the other way, and the next thing I knew, I was getting cut out of the car by the fire and rescue service. It obviously had knocked me out. The full force had sort of hit all my side, so yeah, I don't really remember much about it. Just remember blacking out and waking up, getting cut out of the car, and I ended up getting cut out and airlifted in a helicopter to Wythenshawe Hospital. So it was a really sort of massive moment in my life, in my career. At such a young age for that to happen, especially when, as I said, you've got the world at your feet, if you like. When I was doing so well, it was a massive sort of moment for me that sort of had a large impact really on my career.
Yeah. Well, no, first of all, appreciate you sharing that, Phil. I really do, because but brave of you to come on and talk about it. Some people would obviously shy away from it. In terms of sort of like the accident itself, what kind of injuries were sustained from it? I'm just trying to get some people.
Yeah. So basically, it was. I mean, you'll probably see photos of the car. So it was just basically the full left-hand side of my body. That was the sort of part of the car that took all the impact. I was obviously a passenger in the car, and it's just hit this car head on, and it's the full left-hand side of my body really. So I had broken arms, scapula, which is at the back of your shoulder there, my leg, my ear was ripped off. I think in the end I ended up having sort of like 30-40 stitches in my eye, ear and head, teeth, and then obviously I have got quite a lot of scars sort of where the glasses sort of made quite deep lacerations in my leg and in my arm. But thankfully, I was really well looked after. The club made sure I had the best treatment, and I eventually, after a long road to recovery, made a sort of full recovery. But as I say, at that age, and with everything that I was doing before, it was a massive setback first and foremost. And then obviously, back then you didn't really sort of talk as much about the mental health stuff, but having to go through that at such a young age, it was a massive thing for me in terms of I had to show massive resilience and sort of desire and hunger to get myself back to any sort of level after them injuries and what I went through. Countless hours in the gym, physio. It was a long road really coming back from that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think as well, like as you touched on there with the mental health stuff, I think, well, I mean, I wouldn't know, I've never played sports at the same level you have, but certainly I would envision you do get wrapped away thinking you're unstoppable, untouchable kind of thing, and it's normal to think like that. Doesn't mean anything with regards to yourself. So then to be involved in an accident, because I bet when you were in hospital, the thoughts were going through your head, am I ever going to play again?
Yeah.
What's kind of like... Yeah. So where did you obviously we'll touch on the recovery in a second, but where was you kind of at headspace-wise in terms of, wow, I've had the world at my feet, and now what's next?
Yeah, exactly that, what you just said. So, you've gone from, such a quick progression, you've gone into full-time football, you've been made the captain, you played in the reserves, you're playing at Old Trafford. Everyone's telling you how good you are. You've got your friends back home who are, all raving about you. So you in your head, subconsciously, you probably feel as though you've already sort of half made it. So yeah, to obviously go from all that to being involved in something like that was really difficult. And then the unknown of will I ever play again? Will I come back and be the same player? Because as I say, I used to be really fast. That was probably one of my strongest attributes. After suffering the injuries that I did have, I was sort of thinking that's like my biggest sort of strength that could be affected. And I think it's a confidence thing as well. When you've had so many injuries like I did, it knocks your confidence. And I do remember obviously when it took me about 12 months to finally sort of come back and start kicking a ball about again. But you sort of really sort of apprehensive, and you don't really feel the same for a long time because you're not used to that contact, and you're scared about I don't want to go into a tackle because you still don't feel like you sort of fully recovered. So it was a long road back, and I can't speak highly enough of the club. The club was absolutely amazing with me. Give me the best treatment. Sir Alex Ferguson came and visited me at home in North Road at my mum and dad's house. So that was amazing. When I was in hospital, the club captain Roy Keane and a few other players came and visited me. And as I say, the physios were brilliant with me. Give me all the top sort of treatments and help to get myself back to what I eventually got back to. But I just think it was, in terms of the mental side of things, it was really tough because you're seeing all these lads that are overtaking you. Lads who are was down here and now coming and overtaking you because you're not there to sort of play. And it was obviously a year's worth of progression for me as well. I'd obviously shown a lot of potential and been making really good strides, and then to be out for a full year in football terms, especially at that age, it's massive, really.
100%, and it is good that you've got a good support network around there, because like you said, you could in the headspace go down another avenue. I mean, we had Liam Burbridge on the show a couple of episodes back, and obviously he was involved in accidents. His is slightly different in a sense that he wasn't a sports person or anything before, and obviously he sadly lost his leg, got amputated, but he said the reason he kind of was resilient to come back from that was because of the support network. So I do think it's good to have a support network, because it does help you along the way, especially if you've been in a terrible accident like that, or you've had bad mental health struggles or anything. I always look at it, so you're at sort of a place of like deflation. You're injured, you think people are progressing, you're not being able to do it. But then when you start to see signs that you're recovering a bit better, when is it you get that sort of fuel, that fire in your belly to be like, do you know what, I'm going to make a comeback here, I'm going to get myself sorted and become the Phil Marsh I was prior to the accident?
Yeah, I think, as you said, it's massive with the people you've got around you. I had really luckily to have really good friends, family, and sort of the staff and the players, and the management at the club was all really sort of supportive and keen on me to sort of make a full comeback and get back to where I was. So that obviously keeps you going and sort of strives you on to get there. But I was determined myself, really, because I knew that prior to the crash, where I was at, and the sort of I'd sort of gone from, as you say, in a short space of time, I'd gone from playing at Pilks into Wigan, then from Wigan to United into the academy, and then being on one of three that got kept on, and then straight in my first year to be made sort of like the captain of the youth team and into the reserves and stuff. And I knew that I was on a really good path prior to the crash, so I just wanted to really get back to where I left off, really. But sort of not knowing until I fully started back training whether I was still at the sort of level that I was before that. So it was a difficult period for me, and it did take me probably, I'd say, 6 months, obviously, after recovering from the injury, till I felt comfortable with playing, training, having that self-confidence, and getting back to a level where I was playing well on a consistent basis. I think the club was sort of maybe tried to push me back a little bit quick because they wanted me to sort of get back to where I was, but I remember I did struggle a little bit for the first sort of couple of months, just with probably a little bit of confidence, a little bit of doubt, and just not knowing whether to trust certain things. As a footballer, there's nothing worse than if you're going into a game and you're not fully 100% knowing that you can do everything. I think I was just sort of in a bit of a weird headspace for that couple of months until I sort of got back, and once you get back with the boys, you're in the dressing room, and that's massive part of the thing for me. Like when you're back in the changing room, you've got that banter, the boys are all supporting you, and you just sort of it only takes maybe a goal or just something to give you that little G up, and you sort of confidence is back. And I think for me, once I sort of got through that sticky 6 month period, I sort of kicked on again then, and sort of got back to a sort of good level where I was doing well, and I felt part of the furniture again, if you like.
Yeah, well, that's Joe, mate. That's superb, because I'm sure there'll be people listening now who've maybe not necessarily played at the level you have, but are at a situation, even someone who's playing sport now, you know, for Pilks or something, and if they're ever involved in an injury, that it's not always game over. You can always, you know, recover, rehabilitate yourself, and come back to doing what you're good at and do what you love. So I think it's great that you're quite open to talk about that, and give a level of inspiration to maybe some of the younger people who are playing sports. Okay, so we'll go from what was obviously a massive negative in your life. You're back on track now. You're back in the mixer, sort of thing. Let's talk about a few sort of career highlights for yourself, Phil. So, might put you on the spot a little bit here, but no kind of rush to answer. But what was kind of like the biggest game that you took part in for Manchester United?
I think I'd have to obviously say my first team debut. So when I was obviously told that I was going to be playing for the first team, I think that was obviously a massive moment for me, especially after, you know, coming back from the car crash and, you know, all the sort of adversity that I'd been through. I'd worked my socks off to get back to a level. I'd won a couple of reserve team titles prior to that, and you know, been away abroad with Man United, playing in massive games and winning trophies in different countries. So for me, I just wanted that, you know, first team call up and that first team appearance, because at the time it was sort of like gold dust for any young lads really to even get in the sort of first team training sessions, never mind play a game, because of how good the squad was. As I said, you know, I'm trying to compete against players like Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, Saha, you know, all these players, you know, you're world class players. So as a young lad, you've not really got much hope. But yeah, I think that game, and you know, getting that opportunity, and for the manager to sort of say to me, like, you've got this on merit from, you know, what you've been through and how hard you've worked, and you know, the levels of performance you're showing in the reserves. So yeah, I think in terms of like for just the magnitude of that in itself would probably be the biggest game. Although I did, probably the best game in terms of atmosphere was I actually played in America in a pre-season game where we opened up FC Dallas's new stadium, which was called Pizza Hut Park, against Real Madrid, and that was like 60,000-70,000 people. Really? So I think that obviously was a game which I look back on and think like, wow, that was, you know, unbelievable. But I think, yeah, in terms of, you know, for me, the first team appearance at United was definitely up there.
Superb stuff, and the memories no one can take away from you, mate. You know, there's something, obviously your debut, and then, you know, playing in front of a crowd of that magnitude, it's something not a lot of people do in their lifetime, mate. So well done on that. Who would you say you kind of, you don't need to, you know, unless it's legitimate, you know, giving opportunity to name drop here, but who would you say you bonded with the best when you was playing at United? I think on pitch or in the locker room, whatever.
I think a lot of people may not know this, but I always say it was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for me, because when I was involved in the car accident, funny enough, he did his cruciate ligament, so he was sort of out for a year at the same time that I was out for that year. So me and him was sort of, you know, doing our rehab together. We was really close. We'd both sort of played in the reserves a couple of times as well. And he was somebody who I sort of looked up to. You know, he didn't play every week in the first team, but his attitude was spot on. You know, he was always happy, smiling, great to have around the changing room. And as a striker, for me, you know, when you're speaking to some of these strikers and you want to learn and you get a bit of advice and stuff, he was always, you know, yeah, come and have a chat, come and sit down, ask me whatever you want. Do you want to go and do some finishing? Let's go and get a bag of balls and we'll go and do some finishing. So, you know, to have someone like that who you know, is playing at the top level but is so open and you know, got a lot of time for some of the younger lads who want to try and get to where he is. He was somebody for me who was a massive role model. And obviously, you know, he went on to sort of you know, manage the first team not so long ago, a couple of years ago, which was brilliant. And I think he's, you know, he knows the club inside out. He's a legend of the club. You know, he scored the winning goal in the '99 treble winning season. So yeah, for me, he was somebody who I sort of had a lot of respect for.
Yeah, it's good that you had that relatability as well with both being injured at the same time. As I know, you said you wasn't really a massive football fan sort of growing up, so I don't know whether this will be applicable to you. But are there any players who you've played with or against Or you kind of, say, you pinch yourself moment, like, oh, I can't believe that was something that I can't believe I'm playing alongside this person or against this person?
I think the obvious one would probably be Cristiano Ronaldo. Obviously, he's probably the biggest name I've played with in terms of when you look at what he's gone on to achieve. I think when he was young, I remember when he first joined the club, he was sort of a shy, spotty faced like little teenager who did just signed from Sporting Lisbon. Didn't speak any English, sort of shied away from a lot of the first team, so he used to sort of come and hang around with us because we were similar age to him. So we used to play a lot of table tennis and two-touch and all these kind of things. And I know he started his English lessons quite early because he wanted to learn the language. But he was somebody who, for me, his work ethic was unrivaled. I always tell people the story about, so when we used to play table tennis and stuff, I remember this cracking story, but like I used to beat him the majority of the times, and Cristiano being the way he was, I remember this one day he came and knocked on our reserve team dressing rooms and sort of shouted me out and was like, "Oh, do you want to come and play table tennis?" And I was like, "Yeah, I probably will do in a bit. I've just got a few bits to do, this, that and the other." And I came and found him a bit later on, and we had a game of table tennis, and I hadn't played him for sort of a week, 2 weeks, and the standard that he'd improved was unbelievable. So after the game, he battered me, and I used to always beat him. And he was like, "Oh," he said, "Okay, I've been and bought a table tennis." So he'd been, because he knew that I was getting the better of him in something. He'd been out himself, gone and bought a table tennis table, and must have been practicing every night, trying to, make sure he beats me the next time. And I think that sort of epitomises what sort of he's about. Whether it be football, table tennis, whatever. He's just got that mindset of being the best. So yeah, I think for that alone, he's obviously up there. And another one who I'd probably mention just in terms of, I think a lot of people who you speak to former players about best players, Paul Scholes. Yeah. Like, honestly, unbelievable. Like, when I was lucky enough to train with him, a few times, and when you just see the level of ability he had, he used to just put a ball on a sixpence every time. No one could get near him. His weight of pass, his vision, and he was only 5'6". So for somebody of that size to be able to run a game of football against all these world class players that he's playing against, he certainly was exceptional, and one of the best I've seen.
Okay, I can imagine. Now, obviously, back then, I suppose, like, as you've said, you seen Ronaldo come through the ranks. He wasn't this enigma that he is now, as he would. Everyone knows who he is and what have you. Did you, obviously, you've touched on there that his sort of competitive side, his work ethic, and desire to be the best. But did you kind of have inklings back then he was going to be this world-class player? Did he show early signs of that?
Yeah, I mean, he when he first signed at the club, he had all the tricks and flicks, and I think he maybe overdid that a little bit at the start and tried maybe to do a little bit too much. And he worked really hard with one of the coaches, Rennie Meulenstein, who was the reserve team manager at the time and then went into the first team. He worked with him really well, and I think he sort of said to him basically, like, less is more for you. Like, cut out all the tricks and flicks and just get yourself in the box and score goals. And when it's the right time maybe to do a little bit of skill, do it. But I think because he was trying to do it all the time, and he was getting, sometimes it'd work, sometimes it wasn't. I think a lot of the first team players like your Keanes and that were getting a little bit frustrated with him. So I think he worked really well with him for that couple of years, and then obviously I think it was in maybe 04 or 05 when he just absolutely tore it up and was one of the best players, and obviously he only stayed at United for a couple of years after that, and Real Madrid came calling, and when he went to there he was just an absolute phenomenon, and the career he's had, the amount of goals he scored on a regular basis every single season is testament to his hard work and his hunger and desire to be the best. So I think obviously when you said about would you have seen him going on to probably the heights that he has, probably not, but he always had that hunger and desire to be the best. So that just proves that hard work does actually pay off, especially if you've got the ability as well. Hard work is the main thing.
Yeah,
for
I'm a firm believer. I've had a conversation with a few people, sort of like both in and out of sport. That talent will only get you so far. It is your work ethic that's going to take you to that next level. I have to touch on this because obviously you mentioned he gave you a little visits, come to St Helens when you was injured. Arguably one of the best, not just managers in football, but managers in sport as a whole, Sir Alex Ferguson. What was your relationship like with him?
Yeah, really good. I think a lot of people have the perception of him, you know, the hair dryers and all that kind of thing, and yeah, that was the case if he stepped out of line, and he was, you know, really fair when he needed to be, but if he stepped out of line, yeah, he would give you a dressing down, which I think, you know, that was it, and everyone respected him. For me, he was magnificent with me in terms of the crash. You know, came and visited me at the house. You know, said we'll look after you, whatever you need. He gave me another year on my contract because he said, you know, that's not your fault. He said, so, you know, you've had a year took away from you. You know, we'll give you that back. He obviously gave me my first team debut. And just little things really, like the only one time really he sort of give me a dressing down, and it wasn't just me, it was a group of lads. We'd been out in Manchester during the week just for a few drinks and stuff, and I think someone must have spotted us out, and they used to say they had spies in Manchester like looking for the United lads, so I think this one particular time we'd been spotted, we'd been out for a few drinks and stuff, and the next morning he called us in the office. There was me and about 3 or 4 other lads. I think there was Danny Simpson, Gerard Piqué, and a couple of others had been out for a few drinks after a game or something. And he just gave us a little bit of a dressing down, just in terms of, like, you know, you've got to be professional and don't sort of get into bad habits and stuff. And you know, he's the only person really I've ever been in front of or been in a room with where you have that sort of aura where whatever he says, like, goes, and you don't question it. And I think he earned that, though, because he treated everyone the same, and that's the biggest thing for me with Sir Alex Ferguson. You can ask anyone who was at the club, you know, whether you was a cleaner or whether you was, you know, your Roy Keanes or Cristiano Ronaldo's or Wayne Rooney's. You know, he treated every single person the same. You know, he'd always say morning, he'd always have time for you, and he'd just treat everyone the same. And I think that was why the club was so successful, because it was a family and a community, and everyone was, you know, part of it. So yeah, obviously for me, can't really speak any more highly of him than that. I think, you know, what he did at the club and the amount he's achieved. You know, there's not going to be, you know, many other managers that sort of, you know, reach the heights that he did.
Definitely. I'd say even someone who's like myself, contrasts yourself, not that huge of a football enthusiast, but I think he's a once in a lifetime kind of person, not just a manager. Yeah. So obviously we've just touched on a few career highlights there at United. It sounds like you've had quite a really, you know, textbook career there, Phil. What age did you finally leave Manchester United? Did you make kind of like, did you just kind of go quietly, or did you have a farewell game kind of thing?
So it was 21. I left at the age of 21. So I'd done 10 years. I'd done 4 years full time, obviously post leaving school. So I did 2 years as a professional, 2 years as a YT, and obviously the year in between where I had the crash. 21. I just got to the point really where I'd made my debut sort of the year before, and then I hadn't really sort of had many more opportunities with the first team, just because, again, of how well he was doing, the amount of talent that they were signing year in, year out, because they was winning leagues and cups. I'd played in the reserves for sort of 3 seasons at that point, and we'd won the reserve league 3 times, as well as other trophies and competitions abroad. So I think I'd just got to the stage really where the manager sort of said, like, we'd love to keep you, we would keep you, but you're at 21 now and you need to sort of start playing, you know, proper football. You're ready to sort of make that step now, because as good as reserve team football is, you know, at the end of the day, you're not really playing for anything. You know, you want to play where you're playing for 3 points that actually mean something. So, you know, go and play, you know, in the Championship or League One, play for a club that's, you know, fighting for them 3 points every week to get promotion or to stay up or whatever. He said, I think that's what's sort of the best bet for you now. So yeah, it was a amicable decision between myself and the club, and I sort of accepted that. I thought, I'm really going to struggle here to break into the first team with the amount of quality they've got, the success that they're having, and just sort of like the success rate really of any other younger lads that were trying to get through at that point. I think probably count on one hand in that sort of period how many lads actually broke in and sort of kept a sort of regular sort of slot in that first team. So yeah, I just obviously made that decision and decided that was it, and moved on. Then went to Blackpool after I did do sort of 4 or 5 different trials at different clubs, and I went up to Scotland, went to Inverness when they was in the SPL, had a couple of months there and sort of trialled a few different. I went to Leeds, Huddersfield, Tranmere, but ended up signing at Blackpool sort of after a few trials and stuff. Yeah.
And how long did you play at Blackpool?
Yeah, so basically I signed a 2-year contract at Blackpool. In my first year, when I say I signed a year with a year option. So I signed a year with the possibility of a second year. And when I signed, they sort of promised me to play a minimum of 12 games, sort of in the Championship. So I'm 21. That's a localish team, so I'm not having to move away from home as such. 12 games when you're 21 in your first season, maybe in the Championships, a good sort of starting block to sort of kickstart your career. So yeah, did a really good pre-season, was playing, scoring a couple of goals, enjoying it, and then unfortunately a couple of months into the season I played a game against Tranmere in the cup, and I had the ball in the corner. I've just set it back to the full back, and my foot unfortunately just stuck in the turf, and I just heard a crack, and had to come off sort of 5-10 minutes later because I just couldn't carry on. It was sort of shooting pains, and unfortunately I'd brought me metatarsal, so obviously that sort of ruled me out really for the majority of the remainder of that season. I was 6 months in a boot, just sort of recovering, and then it just sort of wrote off that season really, and I was just sort of wondering to myself, like, every time I seem to be getting somewhere, something happens and sort of sets me back to sort of square one.
Yeah, because you seem to have, as you've just touched on there, I suppose, but you seem to, I remember we've had a chat before the show that you got quite a few injuries, didn't you, that were sort of
pivotal moments, yeah.
So when did you finally decide? I know you're still playing now, obviously at a lower level, lot lower level, but when did you kind of decide, I'm going to branch out into sort of like a different career path? And the football I'm still going to love and have a passion for, and still play it, but what age was you then, and what career path did you go into?
Yeah. So I think sort of in my late 20s when I sort of fell out of full-time football really. So when you're playing full-time and you're playing professionally, it's difficult really to think of anything else, because you're training every day, you're playing games midweek and weekends and stuff. So I think sort of towards me mid to late 20s when I started maybe dropping into some part-time football. You're still getting paid really well, but you've got a bit more time where you can do other things. So I just sort of started dabbling in a few different things what I was passionate about. So obviously my coaching badges, I started that at United. So I sort of did me UEFA B, which is the next step up from what I was on, because I think after I'd finished playing, I've always sort of wanted to get into the coaching or management side of things. So I did that, and then just obviously I because I was working sort of part-time and playing part-time, I fell into working back at Cowley, which was where I was at. I think I played a game at Hyde, and my old head of year, Mr. McCune, was actually at the game, and he just sort of pulled me after the game and had a chat and said, "What are you up to?" And I was like, "Well, I'm just doing little bits here and there, and obviously playing." And he offered me a job at Cowley to go back there as like a TA, just to get some experience and different sort of job role. So I went back there and sort of enjoyed that. Did a couple of years at Cowley, and then, as I said, because I was only playing part time, that was another sort of sector that I was enjoying and sort of have sort of carried on with, and I'm currently working at another school now with SEN kids, which is like kids who've got autism and sort of other difficulties, which I'm really enjoying. It's a challenging job, but again, I love that, and the kids respond really well, and with the sort of background that I've got, I think they sort of enjoy sort of picking the bones out of some of the stuff that I've done and where I've been, and obviously the time at United, so it's going really well.
Yeah, well done, mate. So you've kind of got to the point now where you're a little bit more grounded, you're not necessarily out in the limelight as much now. Again, probably put you on the spot with this question, but in your opinion, what was it like having that level of fame and of fortune, the world at your feet? What was kind of like, and in benefit of hindsight, as you are now sat in front of me, what's it like when you look back? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's difficult really, because when you're there and you're in it, you're sort of in that bubble, and you just take things for granted. You don't really sort of appreciate sometimes the position that you're in. The sort of money you're earning. The lifestyle you live in. The places you're getting to go, people that want your attention and all this kind of thing. I think it's when you actually live in it, it's difficult really to sort of sum up how it is. But when you sort of look back now from where I am to where I was now, it's you think, wow, a lot of things I regret, a lot of things I probably could have done differently. You sort of see a lot of people for what they was. There's a lot of people who you thought was your mate back then, but because you've not sort of made it and you've not got as much money as you probably used to have, a few of them have sort of fell by the wayside, which happens and still will happen to this day with everyone. You always get people who want to be around someone who's successful, but yeah, no, for me, I've always sort of stayed the same. I've never really got ahead of myself. I've never sort of really been somebody to be bragging about what I've done and this, that and the other. I've always sort of tried to stay as level-headed as I can. I know where I've come from. I've been lucky enough to play for Manchester United and have a really good 10 years and some great experiences that I'll sort of never forget. But yeah, for me, it's just I'm still the same person that I always was. I'm always happy to speak to people. If anyone ever wants anything, I'm the first to sort of put my hand up and offer any help. So yeah, I think that that's the best way to be, and I think you get a lot more respect from other people for being like that rather than the opposite, and being arrogant and people thinking that you're the big time Charlie.
Well, no, you've hit an earlier, and I've just to kind of emphasise what you've said there. I know we don't know each other that well, but we've kind of know you've never ever come across as someone who's got an ego or is arrogant. Like, I know some people who've not even played at the level you have in any sport, and they sort of strut round, chest out, like thinking they're still untouchable, even years after they ever was a somebody anyway. And obviously you've come on this show, so appreciate that as well, but also speaking to some of the lads, because we'll touch on Pilks in a second, but they kind of look up to you as someone as well, and you're not someone who kind of uses it for bragging rights or anything. I always use that phrase, use your power for good kind of thing. So yeah, no, just to re-emphasise that. So we mentioned there about kind of having, obviously fame and then fortune that comes with it. Some people, they can go down wrong sort of paths, so it can be a case they turn into drink, drugs. But yours, right at saying, was gambling. You kind of become a little bit obsessed with that. You want to talk us through that? Yeah. So obviously, as I say, when you leave school, you're earning a lot of money at the age of 17, 18. There's probably only so much you can spend it on at that age. I used to live near the Trafford Centre, so we used to be going there quite regularly. Clothes, food, whatever. But yeah, I think just looking back at that sort of time and that period, I think just fell into sort of some bad habits really. Like going into bookies in town and amusements and places like that, and because you've got that bit of extra money, it's just, if I lose it, so what? But I think for me it sort of spiralled a little bit and ended up sort of getting a little bit obsessive and spending a lot of time in there, and wasting probably a lot of money, lending friends a lot of money, which some I didn't get back, but
again, it's, you know, a life lesson, and you learn from them mistakes. But yeah, you know, when you're sort of younger, you're a little bit more naive, and there's probably, you know, things that you should be doing, but you don't really. When I look back now to what it's like nowadays, that there wasn't really as much in place for young players at clubs who was earning a lot of money. You know, like guidance. You know, like what to do with your money. You know, invest, maybe put it into, you know, property, or do something else with your money, rather than just have it and, you know, be free to do whatever you want and left to your own devices. So yeah, as I say, look back on that and think, you know, probably thousands and thousands of pounds that I probably wasted gambling, but I think, you know, it makes you a better person really for, you know, moving forward, and thankfully, you know, with a lot of the money that I've had previously, I've managed to, you know, put that into other things, and you know, to things that I'll hopefully, you know, be good for the future and for my kids and stuff.
Yeah, no, fantastic life lessons, as you say. If you say, what advice could you give someone who maybe is a young prospect like you was, potentially going to get signed, but maybe their ambitions weren't. I'm sure there will be a level if they want to be a fantastic player, but their ambitions is they want that fame and fortune side over the actual sport. If they come to you and say, you know, we've got Phil Marsh, he's was in a similar situation as yourself, what advice would you give them to maybe not pursue the fame and fortune?
Yeah, I think the always the most successful people are the ones that work the hardest. I think if you work hard and you put in the extra effort, like we used to always, you know, say, you know, if you work hard, you get the best results, and always the ones that work the hardest, the fame and fortune will come to you, because if you keep yourself grounded and sort of don't get ahead of yourself, and start thinking about the other things like the fame and fortune before you've got there, you know, you've got a better chance. For me, you've got to, you know, make sure that you're doing more than the person who's like trying to take over you, because if you don't, then they'll you know, surpass you. That's the sort of lessons and motivation we used to always get drummed into us from the coaches at United. If you're standing still, someone else is taking over you. So I think the sort of main key message is, whatever you're doing and whatever it is in life, whether it be football or whatever, you've always got to make sure that you're working your hardest, you're doing the extra, you're sort of focused and not letting all these distractions. Like I mean, I feel sorry for, you know, players nowadays with the amount of distractions and the social media. I never really had that to the level that some of these players do now, and sort of the money's gone through the roof, so they're getting ridiculous amounts of money at a young age with all these distractions. They'll have, you know, all these cars, houses, you know, people wanting to, you know, befriend them because of what they've got, and then obviously the social media, if anything, you know, is seen, it's straight on Twitter or it's straight on Instagram or whatever. So yeah, you've got to just make sure you sort of keep your head, keep level-minded, and sort of tunnel vision with what your sort of end goal is.
Because next thing I was going to ask you, but you've sort of mentioned it there, you wasn't really playing during the social media kind of
not really.
generation.
I think Facebook probably was about, but, you know, nothing to the level. Nothing to the level
as it is now. Because I suppose it's one of the things that I always say. I mean, obviously St Helens, where we're from, it's a small town, and it doesn't take much to get a little bit of attention. You can run a 10k for charity, but because of social media and what have you, you can sometimes be subject to kind of unnecessary ridicule, hate, that kind of thing. And for me, I just think, I mean, I've had it myself, sort of thing, but I know it's a small town, so it's kind of like, you know, big fish, little pond. But whereas if you're playing for United now, or City or Liverpool or whatever, you're too famous, aren't you? You're too well known, you know. If you've got millions of followers online, and a good percentage of that probably is going to be kind of hateful and negative towards you. Did you find you had any of that sort of, like, I'm sure, bad press or anything that you mentioned? Did you get papped on a night out or something?
Yeah, I think as I say, it was far more uncommon really back then, because there wasn't as much about. You'd get, you know, as you say, like, you might get spotted out in Manchester or whatever, or, you know, someone might report something back to the club from what you've done. But as I say, nowadays, you know, if a player gets spotted out or doing something they shouldn't, it's videoed online and it's all, you know, it's everywhere. So I don't think we ever got anything to that extent, and sort of, you know, newspaper articles maybe the odd time was as big as it got for us. But as I say, I mean, I'm glad in a way really that I was brought up in that era where, you know, there wasn't all this, because, you know, that you're young, you do get up to things and you do probably do things you shouldn't at times, but, you know, that's part of your learning, that's part of, you know, growing up and sort of becoming the person that you are, and it's about limiting them mistakes and sort of learning from ones that you do make, and sort of not to sort of do them again. So yeah, I think, you know, for me nowadays it's really, really difficult for young lads to sort of keep level-headed and sort of keep their head down and just focus on what the main goal is, because I say it's that many distractions, and there's that many sort of things that can potentially go wrong. It's difficult, but again, that's a test of character for the ones that want to do it and have that drive to, you know, be the best and make sacrifices like you have to do. Because as I say, like, well, we've not really touched on this, but when you sort of, you know, you leave school, all your mates are going out, getting pissed on a night, you know, going around town, and like I had to sort of knock all that on the head, which was why I chose to move to Manchester, because I took myself out of the equation. I just took myself out of the equation because I knew I'd sort of, you know, get, you know, peer pressured, or like I'd end up, you know, giving in to it at some point. So I took myself out of the equation, and thankfully that was a really good decision for me, because I know a lot of my friends were going out and doing stuff they probably shouldn't have been. So I'm glad that, you know, that was the road I went down, which I'm sure a lot of these lads nowadays will be made to do anyway, because of, you know, how much stuff there is. And
yeah, I think that's a testament to yourself though, mate, and how much you actually wanted it. The fact that you would take yourself out of a place where you're potentially going to fall into those bad habits, those distractions, and move yourself, well, obviously closer to your club as well, but the main focus was to kind of build on yourself and your personal developments. Okay then, Paul. Well, obviously we touched on your kind of career. You're at a stage now where, you know, you're being a bit of a role model for maybe some of the younger people, and you're giving back. You touched on briefly there about your coaching business that you've got. Do you want to just elaborate on that? Give it to tell people what it is?
So obviously currently I'm doing offering some one-to-one and group sessions, which you know, I started doing that a couple of years ago when I did my UEFA B. I'm sort of looking to get on the A licence as well, which is the next step up, which then would enable me to, you know, go and coach at an academy, or, you know, if you know, the opportunity arisen, maybe back at Man United in the youth team at one point in the future. So that's where I'm at currently. So I'm doing that sort of at Ruskin Drive, which is where Pilks play, and I use my school facility as well during the half terms just to do some coaching sessions. Predominantly it's for younger kids, so between the ages of like 6 and 16 is really the age group that I've been sort of working with. But again, a lot of the kids and stuff I've been working with have you know, shown really good progress, and a lot of them have been picked up, or, you know, working in academies. So the extra training with me and that I offer, I'm obviously passing on a lot of the sessions that I was taught at that age, which for me, you know, if you can get good and get yourself sort of, you know, the fine details, fine tuning at that age, it gives you the sort of next step then for, you know, you're ahead of a lot of kids before your age, if you like, because I've already sort of drilled into them the sort of stuff that they need to sort of be nailing down, and the coaching that I thought was, you know, I look back on and think, yeah, that was really good for me at that age, because I say I got picked up at 11 and did 5 years in the academy up to 16, and a lot of the sessions sort of that I was doing back then are ones that I'm replicating now with some of these younger kids, and sort of you can see that, you know, some of them they're sort of struggling, but you just keep persisting with them, and now they're thriving and doing really well. So I think it's
lived experience from you as well, isn't it? And I'm a firm believer you can't buy, you know, you can research or go online, and there probably is some tips and tricks that you can hone in onto your craft, but I think because you've been there, done that, wore the t-shirt kind of thing, it's a little bit more prevalent what you're giving back. You mentioned Pilks, so it's a little bit full circle for you, really, isn't it? Because you started at Pilks, and then obviously you've gone on to have an illustrious career, and you've come back at Pilks. Is Pilks something that's it's you, it's engraved in your kind of thing? Is that because they're doing really well at the moment? Somebody's just I mean, I don't know how the league system works, but just give us an idea of what league you guys have just won where you're playing at now?
Yeah, so we've just won the North West Counties League North. So when you sort of look at the football pyramid, so obviously you've got the Premier League, the Championship, League One, League Two, and then you've got the Conference North, and then you go into the Evo Sticks and the North West Counties. So the North West Counties North that we've just won, we've gone now into the Prem. So the Premier League division of North West Counties, which we'll be playing in next year. If you get promoted out of that, you're then into the Evo Stick League, and then you're only a couple away from getting into the Conference. So I think, for Pilks and the ambition that Jimmy's shown, the chairman, he obviously, has backed the club financially, over the last couple of years, and his plans for the future is he wants to get Pilks into sort of the Conference. So I think, with the progression that we have made and sort of the facilities that they've got down at Ruskin, it's looking bright. So that's obviously been a great year this year for the lads. Obviously, I've not really played much this year. Obviously, having injuries, and I've done a little bit with the 23s and stuff, just to keep myself in and around it. But the boys have done fantastic this year. They've, in a difficult league, they've sort of, been brilliant and the most consistent team over the year, so they fully deserve to get that league win, and hopefully next year they can kick on again and give it a good go.
Yeah, no, obviously it's great for our town, St Helens,
yeah,
that we've got a 100%. Team that plays at that level. So what's kind of I know you mentioned you've not really played much this season, but when you are actively playing for Pilts, what's kind of your role now? Because I know Gaz Kenny's playing there as well.
Yeah.
They're sort of like the older guys. What's kind of like your role for the younger ones? Are you kind of motivating them?
Yeah. So obviously this year, because I sort of got injured sort of early on in the season, I sort of just had to sort of stay in and around the club a little bit, and then I got offered the under-23s job just to stay involved. So I did a little bit with the 23s. So I was just coaching and managing the 23s, and then played a few games for them, quite recently when I was sort of feeling a little bit more fit and better. And then just obviously towards the back end of the season, I started back training with the first team, and I played yesterday in the playoff, like champions versus champions game. So I think for me this year's sort of been a little bit of a write-off, but I've still been sort of involved in some capacity with the team, and obviously it's good for me to be involved in and around the lads, just with the experience, and just to sort of be there at training, just to be part of the dressing room really, and just to sort of rub off on some of them younger players that are trying to come through. You touched on Gaz there. Obviously Gaz has been at the club now for a couple of seasons. He's obviously had really good experience at Rylands, and he's won trophies and done it at this level, so he's great to have in the squad, because you need players like him who's got that experience and who can bring that winning mentality into the group, which I think we've probably lacked a little bit over the last couple of seasons. So yeah, really good bunch of lads, and again, hopefully we can kick on again next year.
Yeah, no, definitely, all credit to him. Okay then, so this kind of portion of the show is sort of like quick fire questions. When I say quick fire, you don't have to like just snap out answers. It's just kind of what I think the listeners would like to hear your take on. So the first one is, I probably know the answers to this one already from the conversation, but Ronaldo or Messi? I'm
saying Ronaldo, but I hate people comparing them.
Yeah.
I just think enjoy both of them. They're both unbelievable players, and we've all been lucky enough to witness two unbelievable players at the peak of the powers. But if I had to choose, I would say Ronaldo, just with the link
you've got history with him. So that's absolutely fine. Okay, who is your? I don't know if this sort of ties into these two, but this is obviously not just our generation. Who's your greatest of all time player?
Probably R9, Ronaldo, Brazilian Ronaldo. Just growing up and obviously watching him, and I think he's sort of had a lot of injuries in his career which have probably held him back a little bit, but still some of the players he used to be playing against, and the sort of some of the goals he scored, and how he played for Brazil and Real Madrid, it was just, and as a striker he's somebody you look at and you think like he is absolutely mustard. And I think for me he's probably one of the best strikers of all time.
No, fair enough. And who's your, and this doesn't have to be football, this, I'm guessing it probably will be, but who's your biggest role model in all of sport?
Tough question. I've probably got a few. If I had to choose one, I'd probably say Sir Alex Ferguson. Yeah. Just based purely off, the time I had at the club, the way he was with me, the success that he had during that period at the club, and sort of the way he is with everyone and anyone. Do you know what I mean? He treats everyone the same. I think that's his biggest strength, and the main reason really why the club was so successful. Just to reiterate that point, I think if he hadn't have been that way, I think a lot of players have come out and said this. It would have been completely different. I think the way he got that respect out of everybody, and the dressing room ended up basically managing itself because of the amount of impact and power he had by just treating everyone on the same playing field. So it was amazing to be part of playing under him and having that sort of connection with him. So it was amazing.
Yeah, no, that's a great choice to be set to have as your best role model. Okay, so we touched on this earlier on. Who's the best player you played with? Who's the best player you played against?
Ooh, tough one. I think I remember playing against Steve. We played Liverpool reserves, and I think for some reason Steven Gerrard had played. I think he must have been coming back from an injury, and I just remember obviously knew who he was and how good he was. I think he was only quite young at this point though, so he hadn't really sort of made a massive impact on the scene as much as he did in the later years. But seeing someone like him at a young age, sort of a little bit older than me, but the amount of talent he had and the aggression and the sort of all-round game what he had was exceptional. And obviously he's gone on to have an amazing career. I think he carried Liverpool for a number of seasons with not as many greater players around him. So yeah, he's somebody who I think he deserves that mention really, because he was a top talent and obviously had a great career.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Right, so a little bit political. I don't expect you to go too in depth. Most recently, Gary Lineker got boycotted from Match of the Day because of his tweets online. What's your, not necessarily, obviously we'll treat that as an isolated incident, but it happens quite a lot frequently now. People who, former players, former managers, it's like they haven't got that freedom of speech, especially if they're in contract with the BBC, Sky Sports on punditry. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because I think you've got your freedom of speech. You should be able to air your own views. I think it's difficult for public figures who are well known and sort of under contracts, as you say, with certain broadcasters and stuff to sort of fully go into the depths of detail that maybe Gary Lineker did. I think you're probably all right, airing your opinion to a certain extent, but I think if you're going into detail like I think Gary Lineker did and maybe a few others, you're sort of crossing that line there where you are going to then sort of start leaving yourself open to wide criticism and potentially the broadcasters or whatever suspending you or whatever. So it's a difficult one. I don't like saying that people can't have opinion on things because everyone should be entitled to say what they think, but I think sometimes when you've got the sort of following that some of these people do have, they sort of maybe need to be a little bit more savvy with the way they go about it and maybe do it in a different way.
100%. I think, like you said, I'll never discourage anyone from having an opinion, but I think if you've got a platform, like obviously Gary has, it's probably best to just stay neutral. I know I sound like a hypocrite saying this, but even with someone like me with a show like this, I'm never going to talk politics into that extent because you're opening up a minefield for you're never going to please everyone with your opinion. So yeah, no, but it's good to hear that from obviously someone who's kind of been there. So last sort of question before we sort of wrap up, Phil, is if you could give any piece of advice from your experiences within sports of anyone who's wanting to progress, to make it. I know we touched on earlier about wanting to do it for fame and fortune, but just to get given an opportunity, even if they just play a debut for the team they love and they never do anything else, it's something you can't take that away from them. What would your kind of advice be from your lived experiences?
I think the first thing for me is just you've got to want to do it. You've got to put the extra effort in. You've got to work hard. You've got to sacrifice a lot of things, especially if you're going to make it at the top level. You can't let people, sidetrack you, get in your ear. You've got to make good decisions. You've got to have good people around you who can support you and advise you, and just keep your head down really, and just try and do everything you can. I've seen a lot of lads who've had umpteen amounts of talent, more than other lads who haven't had as good a careers, because the lads who didn't have as much talent kept their head down and just worked their socks off, and the other lads fell by the wayside because distractions, thought they'd made it before they had, got a little bit too comfortable with the way they was, and just sort of stood still. The lads who just kept their head down and worked their socks off inevitably got the better results. And for me, that is the biggest thing for anybody in any walk of life. Whatever you're doing, whatever your passion is, whether it's work, sport, anything, you only get out what you put in. So for me, if you want to go far with something, it's about how much effort and how much sort of sacrifice you put in to get there. And that's probably the biggest lesson I've always looked at. And for me, it's I touched on Ronaldo earlier. He's probably the biggest example of it for me. He's no it's no surprise that he's the best player, because he works harder than anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's
some fantastic advice, Phil. Mate, it's been an absolute professional, both on and off the pitch. It's been a pleasure. It's been quite humbling, to be honest, to have you on the show. Have you had a good time?
Brilliant, mate. Yeah,
Belton.
Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate
Top man.
you coming
No
on.
problem. Cheers,
I'm
man.
Daniel Hodges. This is Phil Marsh, and you've been listening to HodgeCast. Take it easy. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this episode, or have enjoyed any of our previous episodes, then can I please ask that you follow and subscribe to the channel. It would mean so much to us, and it really will help grow the show, meaning better production, bigger guests and content for you all to enjoy. Thank you, and as always, stay blessed.